This is Michael Wilson. We're looking at the question, when did the disciples first receive the Holy Spirit? So let's look at John 20:22. And this is Jesus. He said, and when Jesus said this, he breathed on them and said to them, receive the Holy Spirit. So after the resurrection, Jesus came to the disciples and reassured them, but he also enabled them through the Holy Spirit. So all the disciples were baptized and immersed in the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, but this is not Pentecost. This breathing of the Holy Spirit would carry them through to Pentecost. It occurred after the resurrection of Jesus and before his ascension. The breath of God in the first creation means physical life. And the breath of Jesus the Messiah in the new creation also means spiritual life. So the believers would receive the baptism of the Spirit at Pentecost and be empowered for ministry. Apart from the filling of the Spirit, they could not go forth to witness effective. So the Spirit had dwelt with them personally in the Messiah, but he was about to ascend to heaven. So now the Spirit would be in them until they were filled and baptized at Pentecost. So what does this mean? Why did Jesus breathe on them? What is the significance of receiving the Holy Spirit this way? And how does that relate to our Christian life today? John wants us to see beyond the literal meaning of Jesus' words and actions and grasp their spiritual significance. He wants us to see Jesus as the one who reveals God's love and grace to us and invites us to participate in his divine life. So the first thing we should notice is that Jesus breathed on them. This reminds us of how God created human beings in the beginning. In Genesis 2:7, we read, then Yahweh formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. So the word for breath in Hebrew is ruach, and it means spirit or wind. It's the same word used in Genesis 1:2, where we read that the spirit, ruach, of God moved and hovered over the waters at the dawn of creation. So this means that when God breathed into Adam's nostrils, he not only gave them a physical life, but he gave them a spiritual life. And so these disciples received their spiritual life through Jesus breathing. He gave them a share into his own divine nature and image. He made him a living being capable of knowing and loving God. We know that this original state of grace was lost when Adam and Eve disobeyed God and ate from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. But Jesus restores that as he breathes in to the disciples. They fell into sin and death and were banished from God's presence. Their relationship, Adam and Eve, with God was broken, and they became alienated with him. This is why Jesus came into the world, to restore what was lost in the fall. And he came to reconcile us with God and bring us back to him. He came to give us new life in him. He came to breathe on us again. So when Jesus breathed on his disciples and said to them, receive the Holy Spirit, he was doing something similar to what God did in Genesis 2:7. He was giving them a new creation, a new birth, a new identity. He was giving them his own divine life and nature. He was making them his children and friends. But there is more. Jesus did not just breathe on them. He also said, receive the Holy Spirit. This implies that there was something specific that they are supposed to receive from him. What is it? Well, the answer can be found in John 14-16. And Jesus gives a long discourse here, so we won't go through it, but check it out if you want, about the Holy Spirit and before his passion and death. In these chapters, he reveals several things about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is another helper or advocate who will be with them forever. The Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth who will teach them everything and remind them of what Jesus said. The Holy Spirit is the one who testified about Jesus and enabled them to testify as well. The Holy Spirit is the one who will convict the world of sin, righteousness, and judgment. And the Holy Spirit is the one who will guide them all in truth. and declare to them what belongs to Jesus. In other words, the Holy Spirit is the one who will continue Jesus' work in them and through them after he leaves them. And the same is true of us today. It is often thought that there were 9 gifts of the Holy Spirit, which are outlined in 1 Corinthians 12 to 14. But there are more. There are other lists of gifts in other places in the New Testament, and the total number seems to come up to 21. It includes gifts like service, teaching, exhortation, giving, leadership, mercy, apostleship, helps, administration. Something to think about, my friends. Has the expanded list and the original list in 1 Corinthians ceased to exist? I think not. We see them at work today in building up the bride of Jesus, the church.